Dimitri is in Belgium, so thank him first of all for getting up so early in the morning. He started sea kayaking in 2007. He's never stopped. When he's not sleeping, he's on the water doing mostly day trips, shorter trips, surf sessions, training, rescue and paddle techniques. He coaches. He founded North Sea Kayak, and you can see their YouTube channel, to unite Belgian like-minded paddlers. It's a group where everyone's welcome to join, regardless of age and level, experience, or gender. They paddle safely and responsibly and share all their knowledge with those who paddle with them. His mantra is take care of your team and they will take care of you. He writes articles on a regular basis for the Belgian Canoe and Kayak Federation and other publications. He is the first person to complete a solo unsupported crossing of the North Sea. That was in 2015. And he loved it so much, he did it again, solo unsupported in 2018. So he'll talk about that. He'll also talk about his training programs. He's got his training day, which is an annual event where his team shares all their knowledge. And then he expanded that to his sea training camp, which is a week-long training experience. So I think we're really grateful that Dimitri has agreed to do this at a weird time for his time zone. Take it away, Dimitri. Thank you so much.
Oh, good morning or good evening to you all, Bay Area sea kayakers. It's been an honor to be here in the middle of the night. I wouldn't call it morning. It's only 5 o'clock and I got up at 4. It's a real pleasure. I know some of you by name and by looks, so nice to meet. Before I'm about to start the lecturing on the North Sea crossing, I'm going to start by the very beginning. It's very important to know that over here in Belgium, we didn't got any support and we started all by ourselves. There isn't such a thing like the ACA or the BCU over here in Belgium. I started 15 years ago together with my wife, Sylvie. She will be here in a minute just to say hi to you.
Hi all, good morning.
Okay, so 15 years ago we started. We are living very, very close to the water, to the North Sea, over here in a coastal village called Kerke. And we got 2 options to do, or 2 choices we would choose from. One would be sailing in a little dinghy, and the other was buying 2 sea kayaks to start with on the water. Now, obviously, the choice fell on buying the 2 sea kayaks. And it's good to know we started with a very, very, very low budget. We bought just standard equipment, and our very first sea kayakers were actually set on top kayaks. Now it's like cursing or swearing in the church, they say here. Most kayakers don't like sit on tops, but I must say we had a lot of fun with them. And the first 5 years we paddled a set on top. That's like a barge compared to a normal standard closed cockpit sea kayak. And after all those years, we started to expand our trips, go faster, go further, longer. And suddenly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area here, Belgium, and then there's the other side. So Europe, Belgium, then there's the other side, the United Kingdom. Divided by the Dover Strait. So that's the North Sea and the southern part of the North Sea that goes into a gap, a small gap called the Dover Strait. And after a few years, we started dreaming about doing a crossing from the coastal village in France called Calais to the coastal village on the other side in the United Kingdom called Dover. That's why it's called the Dover Strait. Now that's a crossing of about 30 kilometers. To be honest, it would be possible to get up now if the weather is good, and it counts also for many of you, just to get up, get your kayak and paddle 30 kilometers. That's not that far. But you must know in that area, there's a very, very, very powerful tidal stream. So that would be a challenge. Now we started looking things up. And almost within a few weeks, we got enough information to see that that kind of crossing would be nearly impossible or way too expensive. Let me explain. You need special permission from France to do that crossing. And with that permission, there's also a rule or a few rules. You cannot do it unsupported. You have to do it with a pilot vessel, with a registered pilot vessel, and you have to register it months in advance. And you also have to pay it in advance. And it costs you several of thousands of euros, which is approximately the same in dollars. So we're not professionals. We don't have a budget to do such things. And at the time being, we were certainly not sponsored by anyone. So we thought, okay, no, this is too much fuss. It costs us too much money just to do our sport. So we considered another option, and that's where the North Sea crossing came in instead of the Channel crossing. So if you do like the swimmers are doing, and there are a lot of swimmers each year that actually swim the distance between France to the United Kingdom. That's about 30 kilometers. So the next thing we said, okay, not the Channel anymore. We're gonna aim our arrows between Belgium, where we live, and the United Kingdom, but much more to the north. Instead of Dover, we picked another harbor, which is Ramsgate. And instead of Calais, which is the coastal village in France, we picked Newport. That's the nearest harbor in Belgium to paddle from and to. So from Newport to Ramsgate. Now, it was only a dream at that moment because actually dreaming of it and speaking of this out loud was already very intimidating, to be honest, and it still is. Tidal streams are very, very powerful over there. It's a very treacherous sea, the North Sea. It's considered one of the most dangerous seas in the world, and it's because it's very shallow. Shallow and a high tidal stream means a very difficult wave pattern. So you must be on the lookout at all times, and certainly when you have to paddle in total darkness at night. Now, we're not there yet. It was just a dream at the time. And the first thing we had to do was thinking about, am I in a physical shape that is good enough to do such kind of long distance trip in one time without taking a break or taking a nap in between. And the first thing we did, actually, it was planned for two. I had myself and one of my team members who was interested in joining me. And we said, okay, no, we're gonna start preparations for this, start training for this. And with our sit on top, still with the sit on top sea kayak, which is much slower than a standard sea kayak, we said we're gonna do a trip for training that is more than 100 kilometers. You must know that the distance between the harbor of Newport in Belgium and the harbor of Ramsgate in the United Kingdom is at the shortest 100 kilometers. So we needed to be able to paddle at least 100 kilometers in a row without taking a break. So we did a trip here, starting in Newport Harbor, but very close to the shore. We paddled to France, to the second harbor, which is a long distance, by the sea, close to the shore, and where there is always a chance for us to let us pick up by Sylvie, who was then the backup team on land. And the day before the preparations, my friend said, okay, I'm not going to make it. Have a look at the weather forecast. It's too bad. And by too bad, I meant it was force 4 up to 5. And that for the first stretch of the training tour that we did. So that's not a lot of wind if you're planning on playing or surfing, but it's really a lot of wind, headwind, if you need to paddle for more than 50 kilometers. And I by myself, I said, okay, no, it's the last of the season here. It was September already or October. I said, oh no, if you're not coming with me, I'm going to do it alone. I trained so long for this. I waited so long. I'm going to do it alone. So it was close to shore, safer than the actual North Sea crossing. So I did it alone. And up to today, this training, this preparation is still my longest trip ever. I had 114 kilometers in a row with a set on top, which most people say you're really crazy. And to be honest, I'm a little bit. And it worked, but it took me very, very long. It took me almost 24 hours to reach the end of that trip. And in the middle, I called my wife, who was my backup team, and it was the first and only time that I was tempted to say, okay, this is not gonna work, come and get me. But I didn't. And after that trip, I got back on the shore, and I fell asleep almost immediately on the shore. So Sylvie, my wife, wake me up and say, shit, oh no, you have to come with me, take a shower and get into bed. You're not gonna sleep here on the shore, because I was completely exhausted. But then again, days afterwards, I was totally exhausted, my muscles, everything, completely exhausted. But I knew at that point, okay, this is the first positive thing about my dream to cross the North Sea. It works. But I need to train more to be able to do it faster, because tidal streams, remember, every 6 hours the direction of the tidal stream changes, and it's in your advantage or it is not. There's no in between. So I trained for a few other years, but still knowing, okay, this is gonna work. And in the meantime, I bought myself my very first closed cockpit sea kayak, which was at that point a P&H Scorpio, a polyethylene boat, the low volume model, and it paddles already more than 1 kilometer an hour faster than my set on top, which was a good thing. Certainly when you're doing long distance travels like this. So after a few years, there were a lot of things that I had to learn myself. I just talked about the preparation tour. That's just to see if you have enough muscles to do it, if you have enough strength, if you have enough endurance. But there it stops. And to do the North Sea crossing, that's not the only thing you need. You need a solid understanding of the sea, and you need solid navigation skills. If you do not have them, it's dangerous and even life-threatening to undertake such a journey. So I learned, again, everything myself. I learned how to navigate during the years on the sea, on open water, where there's no land to fix on, where the nearest buoy, there are a lot of buoys in that area, and by a lot, I mean every 20 kilometers. So it means if you're in between and with the environment, it's almost impossible to pinpoint the next buoy. So if you find yourself in between of two buoys and you look behind you and in front of you, you don't see any land, you don't see any buoys, and you need to know where you are at any given time. Then there's also the direction of the tidal streams you must know of at any given time. So it was a really a rather long journey to learn all of those things without taking a single lesson from other sea kayakers, because at that time there were almost no sea kayakers here in Belgium. Now, before I started, there was one thing I did found. The trip, the North Sea crossing, was done before in 2005, also by a Belgian team existing out of 4 sea kayakers. So I looked up that information, and I saw they paddled for 22 hours in a row to reach the other side. Now they paddled from Ramsgate to Belgium, and they had a pilot vessel with them. So that was the first problem in my head. I told myself, okay, no, it's done before. We must do it better. So together with my friend at the time, we said, okay, we're going to skip the pilot vessel, no support. We're going to do it unsupported. Okay, not a problem. We kept on training. We kept on learning and shortening our navigational skills. And then the year before the actual first crossing, we started thinking about how we would act as a person during that crossing. And that's the third important thing you should know. The first important thing is strength and endurance. The second are your navigation skills and also your safety skills. Are you able to rescue yourself in case of a capsize along the way? And then the third thing is the mental aspect of the whole training. I know a lot of people by now who are perfectly able to paddle 100 kilometers or even more in a row, but there are only few who would do it in those conditions and in an open sea. So it's also a mental game. You must be prepared mentally to be completely alone and cut off from all support you could otherwise imagine. If you find yourself in the middle of the North Sea and you activate your personal locator beacon in case of a distress situation, it will take, in the best case, 1 to 2 hours before they reach you. And that's really the best case scenario. It normally takes longer. So mental preparation, that was also an aspect. We did a lot of other tours in between who brought us very far offshore. One of them was the West Hinder. It's an anchorage area that is 30 kilometers offshore, to give you an idea. That was also one of our preparation tours before the actual North Sea crossing. And then it came. I got to be short. I got a lot to tell, but 45 minutes is really short. Then 2015, 1 week before launch, I called my kayak buddy and I said, okay, now we have our window of opportunity. The weather is good, not for 1 day, not for 2 days, but for 3 days in a row, which was the absolute minimum we needed. Because if weather systems start shifting, you need a margin. That's why we stick to the plan of only launching the actual crossing if we have 3 days, at least 3 days in a row with calm weather. So there it was in the middle of the summer of 2015, a week in advance. I called my buddy. He said, oh no, I can't make it. I have other things to attend to and I cannot make it. And that's probably one of the probably one of the toughest decisions in my whole life I made at that point, together with my wife. I said, okay, no, it's been years that I'm training for this. Now I'm going to do it with or without you. So if you cannot make yourself free at that day, I'm leaving alone, which is even harder to do, because if you're with two, also for safety reasons, also for the mental aspect. So I told it over for a few days. I gave him a few more calls. Are you sure you're not coming with me? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure I'm not coming with you. And I made the final decision 2 days in advance. On our last call, I said, okay, now it's definitive. My wife needs to register with the ferry to get to the other side to pick me up if I succeeded. And I made the decision to leave alone. It's a tough decision. So there's no pilot vessel, there's no support, and there's also no kayaking buddy to talk to during all those hours out there on the sea. So in the middle of the night, I started in Newport Harbor. I said goodbye to my kids and wife. And I started in total darkness. I chose my trip during spring tide, which is an advantage to paddle at night because there were no clouds, the weather was good, and you have a lot of visibility with the moonlight. So during the whole trip, I almost never used my headlight because it wasn't necessary. I saw enough. And after 30 minutes, your eyes get used to the darkness. So I started paddling during the night, and you can divide the trip itself, the crossing itself, in 3 parts. First part during the Belgium waters, which was in the first 6 hours. I chose to start with the tidal stream against me. So if you have a look at the second video, there it's well explained with a map, so you can see the streams and all. I started with the tidal stream against me because on the Belgium side, the tidal stream is less powerful. I knew I had to be on the water for maybe 24 hours. So I knew, okay, I'm gonna take the hardest part first. So 6 hours battling against the tide, it was really, really exhausting, but you're still fresh. It's only the beginning of the tour. So the second lap is actually the crossing of the shipping lane. You must know it's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the whole world. There are a lot of ships passing through. I'm not sure about the numbers anymore. I thought it was more than 500 each 24 hours. So it's really a lot. And by ships, I mean big ships, ocean ships. It's like if they're passing along you, it's like an apartment building, really big ships. So no sailing vessel, no fishing vessel, but really, really big ships. The shipping lane itself, it's divided in 2. In one direction or in both directions, a shipping lane, and each lane is about 5 kilometers to cross. So if I say you have to cross it straight and quick, well, it's 10 kilometers at least, and you're already exhausted. So you really have to make it quick. No, I had only 3 or 4 ships, and they didn't come closer than 1 kilometer. So it was completely safe. There are a lot of people saying, oh, it's dangerous. It's not. You can see them coming from very far. You can adapt to their course, which I did a few times, and it's safe. At that point, I had the tidal stream with me. So I was almost flying. Certain parts are 9 to 10 kilometers an hour, which is really, really fast to compensate for the first part, of course. And then there's the third and last part. When you crossed the shipping lane, you find yourself in British waters. That was also the place where I could make actual contact on VHF radio again for the very first time after paddling the whole night and the whole morning with the British Coast Guard. So I stated my intentions. They already knew because I sent them an email. So they were informed. I asked them to call my wife and to say that I'm still 35 kilometers out there in the sea, that I was still good enough to make it to Ramsgate Harbor. And then you have probably the most dangerous or the most fun area, depending on how you look at it, of the whole trip. And that was the last part in front of the British coast. And I'm still speaking of 20 kilometers offshore. So you can't almost see the land from there. There are a lot of shallow waters with a lot of shipwrecks. If you have a look at a sea chart, shipwrecks means danger. So it's really a weird area. There was almost no wind. And in that area, there were waves of about 1 meter in height. So I don't have to tell you, if you have already paddled 60 to 70 kilometers, at that point, you're already tired. You really have to be careful to cross the area. So I had 2 choices by then: cross it in a straight line and enjoy the waves, or go around, make 5 to 10 kilometers extra, but be in more safer waters. Obviously, I chose the first thing. I was still in relatively good shape, and I say, okay, let's enjoy the waves. It's very shallow there, and I did without any problems. During the last stretch, so the third part, so again, the first part is against the tidal stream, the second part is with the tidal stream, and the last part is with the tidal stream coming from the side. So you have to compensate. If this on this side of the screen is Belgium, and this is the United Kingdom, and my pencil is the kayak, I needed to compensate almost 45 degrees to keep on paddling in a straight line. So that's really a lot, and full speed, not like a tourist, but really full speed. If I didn't, I would be pushed away to open sea within a few hours. So I arrived finally at Ramsgate. I paddled a bit less than 17 hours. Now, I really hated it to arrive because there was no one there. I expected my wife to be there, my kids to be there, and they weren't. They weren't because I calculated my trip for 24 hours, and in the best case scenario, 22 hours. Now, at the time, I told Sylvie only to take the ferry when I was about halfway, because if I had to cancel my trip, if I had to get back to the European side of the North Sea, then she would be already on the ferry and not be able to pick me up. So that was the arrangement. Sylvie would only take the ferry to the United Kingdom about halfway my trip, so about 10 to 12 hours. So I arrived at Ramsgate at the only slipway in the marina. Dead tired, dead tired. The first thing I did, I had some food with me, of course, eat something, and then I fell asleep literally on that slipway, literally on the slipway. And I still remember there were some fishermen after 1 hour who arrived at the slipway with their catch of the day. They were looking very weird to the guy in the kayak or with the kayak sleeping, and I was immediately awake because of the noise of the fishing boat. And we had a little chat, and they asked, "Where do you come from? What are you doing here?" And I explained them, I'm coming from Belgium. And I still remember they didn't answer me. They didn't say anything. They said, mm-hmm, and they just went along. So I suppose they actually did not believe me that I was coming from Belgium. That was the first time I did the North Sea crossing. The second time I can be a bit more short. The second time I was better prepared. I had a faster boat. The boat that I was then using was the P&H Cetus, which is the composite brother or sister of my first kayak, the Scorpio, which is a bit faster. Now, the second North Sea crossing, my luck was a little bit out. The weather forecast was very good, but at the start, it proved that there was a little bit more wind than in 2015. So the second time I did it in 2018, 3 years later. And I had a bit more headwind. Not a lot, but enough to make my time 15 minutes more than the first time. So I had a faster kayak, but I had a slower time due to the wind. The second time my wife was earlier. I had so I had my children and my wife waiting at the slipway over there. The second crossing in 2018, I had to adapt again because with the tidal streams, and I took along halfway, I took another route to be in a more comfortable position to enter the harbor. To give you an example of how many possibilities there are to do such a crossing, in 2018, I had contact with a German team, very nice, friendly, and very skilled sea kayakers. And they asked me, okay, Dimitri, you did the crossing once. We would love to do it in 2018 as well. Can you help us? And I said, of course, I will help you. And we agreed upon starting together. So on the second crossing, we actually started in Newport Harbor on the slipway with 3 people. The German team, there were 2 of them with no support boat, and myself. And in advance, this is very important to know, in advance, we made the arrangement if our speed levels were too different, we would split up. So I would take the crossing alone, and they also will follow their path and their speed. And after maybe 5 to 10 kilometers, they say, okay, Dimitri, this is not working for us. You're paddling too fast. we really need to split up because we're going to be burned up by the end. We're not going to reach it at that pace. And for me, it was the same. I said, okay, I need to hold back, which is not normal for me. I'm going to be exhausted just by holding back. To give you an example, at the time of that decision, we were taking a break at a buoy. So the tidal stream was against us. And I said to the German team, okay, I did the first crossing. You have 1 minute. So that's 60 seconds. You have 1 minute to eat and to drink something. And they said, what, 1 minute? I said, 1 minute. You have exactly 1 minute for that. And then we need to move on. It took them 5 minutes. They said, okay, no, it's really pushing the food and into my throat. That's 1 minute. It's too short. Give you an example. It took them 5 minutes, and it took us an extra 15 minutes to get back to the same buoy as where we started our break. So that's about the conditions you have on the North Sea on a calm day on spring tide. So we made a decision, and I did my part, and they did theirs. They did it very well. But they were actually, because they were a bit slower, which is completely fine, they were pushed by the tidal stream 6 hours later, and they were pushed to open sea, and they really had to make a whole tour in order to get back. I got in Ramsgate Harbor in the late afternoon, and they got into Ramsgate Harbor in the middle of the night, really at midnight, so 6 hours later than I have. But in good condition, they did well. But it's good to know that you have several options, and it's really hard. You really have to maintain a certain speed to battle against the tidal stream. If you're not having that speed, you're pushed out to the sea. You need to wait for the tide to turn and then get back to the harbor. So it costs you at least an extra 6 hours. So that's about the story and the shortest version possible that I can tell you about my North Sea crossing. Just to give you some numbers, I already said it took me about 17 hours. The distance between the two harbors is 100 kilometers, and both attempts I did 107, and the second time 108 kilometers, because it's difficult to paddle very, very straight. I told you about the difference between the Dover Strait and the North Sea. If you do the crossing between France and the United Kingdom, it's not considered a North Sea crossing, it's a channel crossing, it's 30 kilometers. If you do it like I did from Belgium to the United Kingdom, it's considered a North Sea crossing. There is one website who keep a hold of all those records. It's the PSK website, the Performance Sea Kayak website, and you can find all those stuff over there. So that's maybe a handy thing to search on the internet if you have some time. It's called the Performance Sea Kayak website. Yeah, it's about the North Sea crossing. I'm not sure. I'm going to have a look at Jonathan. Do we let people ask questions now, or can I have another talk about safety, or is my time up?
But time is flexible. I think we should let people ask questions. My guess is there are some, so I'd hate to move on from that. So if you have a question, raise your hand or use the question. Tom, I see your hand up already. Go right ahead.
Wow, really impressive. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you navigated? I mean, when you're doing that long a crossing and you've got these changing tides and you don't really know how much wind you're going to have, you have to be somewhat flexible. Were you following compass courses you'd plotted on a chart? Were you setting waypoints on a GPS? How were you deciding on your ferry angles to make the crossing?
That's a very good question. And I did some lecturing on the North Sea, but then I had 3 to 4 hours. That's why I didn't tell you anything about it. I rely on 2 systems. First one, my own navigational skills, which is still a map and a compass. And secondly, a GPS. So I carried both. a sea chart. You will see it in the video. If you have a look, certainly in the second video, you will see that there's a big map right in front of me on the cockpit. There's an extra compass, so I carry 2 compasses. I carry 2 GPSs just in case of, because there's not a lot of margin for mistakes or errors on such things. I calculated everything in advance, but I made 3 plannings, plan A, B, and C, in case the wind changes. So I could see my courses on the map written. So with degree angles and all, and ferry glides during the whole trip. And like in 2018, during the second crossing, I had to move on to plan B because I was too soon at a certain point and the tidal stream was already beginning to turn. Then I have my GPS with waypoints, which I plotted from the sea chart myself, just to be sure. But it's imperative to have good navigational skills, because if the battery of your GPS dies, and I carried several extra batteries, but you never know, or if you lose your GPS for some reason, you got to be able to paddle further without GPS. It's very difficult, but I was trained for that. It works. So I have two things to rely on, both the chart and the compass and the GPS.
I'll ask a question. Dimitri, did you do anything formally to maintain your positive mental attitude? Did you just let your mind drift? Did you think of things? Did you count strokes? Did you have any games or tricks to keep yourself sane during that crossing?
Well, you got to be a little bit insane to do such things, but yeah. During the trip, there were 2 very beautiful moments, and both times actually. The first time is when the sun comes up, and I never ever enjoyed a sunrise that much as during boat crossings. You have to paddle for hours and hours and hours in a row without actually seeing where you are going to. And then suddenly, when you have a half hour before sunrise, it begins to lighten up a little bit, and then you see the sun. So that's a very, very beautiful moment, a very positive moment. And then there's a second moment during the whole tour. There are a lot of moments, but these are the 2 most important ones. And the second moment is when you start doubting yourself, when you look at the distance and you see the Dover cliffs. It's all cliffs, it's very wide, so you can see it from very far away. And then you say, the first time I was looking, no, that's not possible, I'm still too far. No, looking at the map, no, that's too far away, it's not possible. And you keep on paddling, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and say, okay, it's possible, this is the other side. And then you think by yourself, okay, I reached the other side. But if you have a look at the map, it's still 30 kilometers of battling with a very strong tidal stream in the side. Then other times, I think every hour I took a very, very short break. I'm more of a nature person, so I enjoy everything I see, even if it's nothing. I enjoy nothing. If you're out there on the sea, it's 360 degrees of water. What is not to like about it? It's fantastic. You're alone. There's nobody harassing you. You're just there on your own. Of course, it's very tiring, and there were a few moments when you're thinking to yourself, well, why do I do this? Actually, but it goes away when you see bigger ships passing by, or like I told the third part where there are the waves. Then your mind is fixed to something else. With the waves, there were a lot of seals in that area, so you try to fix on the positive things. Also with communications, with the VHF radio, a positive moment in the middle of the tour. With the portable VHF radio, you cannot reach the Belgian Coast Guard behind you, and you cannot reach the British Coast Guard. That's why I also carry a personal locator beacon with me. So that's also a good moment when you first try your radio in British waters. Okay, this is Sea Kayak Midway 1 to the British Coast Guard. Can you hear me? And they say, okay, we hear you. Everything okay? So that's also a positive moment. Food is very important. There were a lot of people thinking that I use a lot of sports drinks and energy bars and whatever. I didn't. I had one time a Spanish team with me to do the West Hinder Challenge, which is a very far offshore trip. And they had liquid gels and whatever. And they had a very funny look on their faces when they saw the guy from Belgium eating such a big sandwich like this in the middle of the trip. So it's also important that you stick to your food that you are used to eat, that you don't start by eating or drinking other stuff like energy drinks if you don't do that otherwise.
Thanks. Those are all really good tips for our big Gonzo trip around the bay that we're going to be doing in a week or two. We'll have sunrise too. Other questions? Raise your hand. Anybody want to? Oh, there, Franca.
What kind of train? How did you prepare just physically? What kind of training did you do? Did you do interval training? What did you do?
I do the same as I still doing. So you could say that I'm right now prepared to do another crossing. Should the conditions be good next year, next summer, I'm still trained well enough to do that in the same time. We put a lot of variation in our training schedules, so it's a very good question. Interval, yes, but we keep the interval training for downwinders, because if you do a downwinder in rough conditions, it's interval. And it's also technique. We do a lot of longer trips, day trips, up to 50, 60 kilometers. But it's I cannot say that I train a lot on the distance of the crossing. So just before my 2 crossings, the only time I did a 100 kilometer plus trip was during that preparation, because it's impossible. If you train for the marathon, you're not going to start running a marathon every week, and it's a bit the same. Then for techniques, that is also very important. People over here sometimes tell us you're crazy, but we actually go out in the mist. If it's very, very misty, very foggy, we go out on the sea. Why? Just to maintain our navigational skills. But it's one thing to see navigational skills in a classroom, which is good, but you have to be able to apply it in reality. And when you go out in misty conditions where you can only see for 200-300 meters, it's like paddling in a bubble, in a soap bubble, if you know what I mean. You're in the middle of it, and the soap bubble moves with you. So if you start on the beach and you say, okay, my goal is a buoy, because we don't have islands over here, my goal is a buoy, then you have to be very, very, very specific with your navigational skills and your calculations of your course. If you're 200 meters off course on a trip that is 10 kilometers, which is nothing, 200 meters is still well paddled. But if you miss it in the mist, you lose the buoy. You're not gonna find it. So we really paddle a lot with charts and compasses, and we keep the GPS below decks. So we always carry a GPS out of safety precaution, but it's below decks. It's in our mini hatch. We cannot even see it. And we only grab it in case of emergency, or if there's any doubt, and that's it. And otherwise, we're trained on paddling on maps and compasses. As for the physical part, if I'm not be able to go out on the sea, which is every now and then the case, then I still go out with the bike. I have a mountain bike which I use 1 to 2 times a week, depending. If I have the choice, I get in my kayak. That's always the first option. But if there's not enough time, or if the weather is too bad, then it's mountain biking, just to keep in good shape.
Thank you.
Any other question? Thank you. Yeah. More questions. I don't see any hands, but if you got one, wave like crazy. If there's no other immediate questions, Dimitri, maybe you could talk a little bit about your your training and your camps and all that. There's videos on that as well.
Yes, I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit short. If I'm over my time, just wave and say, "Oh, stop blabbering," because I would love to blabber and talk and talk and talk for hours in a row, but that's not the point, or you're gonna fall asleep after a while.
Maybe 10 minutes.
Maybe 10 minutes. So that's very short, but I'm gonna give it a try. So I first told you at the beginning of the meeting here that we tried everything ourselves, which means we made a lot of mistakes. I'm gonna give you one example. One of the first times, so I bought together with my wife 2 sit-on-top kayaks, which the first 5 times we paddled in the nearby canal, not on the sea. And after the 5th time, I said, I want to be able to see kayak and not on the canal. So I went alone the first time without my wife on the sea. It was a very calm day. And I stated my intentions to my wife. I said, okay, I'm going to paddle a short distance. I wasn't even trained that well at the time, and stayed close to the shore, and I capsized. And just right behind the surf zone, I capsized. With a sit-on-top kayak, you should think it's easy to get back on. And it didn't work. I tried to climb back on the kayak. It didn't work. And I still see myself swimming, one hand grabbing the kayak and the other hand swimming back to the shore. It wasn't that far, maybe 200 to 300 meters. I wasn't aware of the tidal stream at the time. I wasn't aware of anything. I never had been in a kayak before. And I reached out at the time we have a few kayak clubs here, and they all started laughing there. I spoke to a few persons. They said, "Oh, you're crazy going out on sea, stick to the canals." That was the answer I got, unfortunately. And then you have 2 options, sell your kayak and start playing pétanque, or saying, yeah, I'm not going to say the word now, but say, okay, I'm going to do it my way. And that's what we did. And the first thing I said when I got back on the shore was to my wife, okay, look what happened. I capsized and I wasn't able to self-rescue. And now it's very obviously, everybody talks about self-rescue techniques, but there was less videos on internet. If we didn't have a look at them, there was actually nothing. And from that day on, that was the spark that we got to start training and building up. And during the years, we bought, of course, the closed cockpit kayaks, which is a completely different self-rescue technique, also to rescue your buddy. It's completely different than a sit-on-top kayak. We started develop techniques, and then we started actually looking at the internet on how other people were doing it. And then you see, and you probably have seen it yourself, you see a lot of videos on the internet. Some are very interesting, and some of them are actually, yeah, sorry to say it, rubbish. So we start testing everything out. If we saw a technique on the internet, whether it was a good technique or a bad technique, we tested it out, all of them. And now we're in a position to say, okay, when we organize a training day or a sea kayak training camp, more on that later on, then we know if we teach people, okay, you have to do it that way, we know why. Not because we read it in a book or saw it in a video, but because we already done it for 100 of times in completely different conditions. One self-rescue will perfectly work on flat water, but it won't work when the conditions are getting rougher. And it's the same for an assisted rescue, and it's the same for a whole completely rescue scenario. So after a few years, there were a lot of people coming to us and say, okay, you're sea kayaking here in Belgium, I mean. They say, okay, can you give us some tips? And then the story began. We say, okay, of course we gave some tips and we helped people out. And after a while, there were, well, not so many, because it would like it. There weren't hundreds, but there were tens or dozens of people who are coming to us for information, that we say, okay, we're going to start giving lecturing. And the first lecture I give was about safety equipment. What do I carry with me on the sea? And then from that on, and we started a concept, the training day, you have a movie, an action movie like that. That's where we got the name Training Day. And the concept was in the morning, it's a lecturing, so very theoretical, where we show all of our stuff, all of our gear to the people. And in the afternoon, it's near a canal, so, or in the harbor, it's in sheltered water, so it's completely safe, and everybody can join. If you're brand new to sea kayaking, you can join. If you already have some experience, you also can join. And then in the afternoon, we divide it, because an afternoon, it passes very quickly. It's only 4 hours. We do the self-rescue, we do the assisted rescue, we do some basic maneuvering. That last is also very important, because we know a lot of people who are very good, very skilled at rescues. But then we see the next problem, that is, if someone capsizes, yeah, I know how to rescue him, but it takes some people ages to reach the swimmer. So that's why we also are giving the maneuvering, because that's equally important than just performing the rescue. If you're good at the rescue, okay, that's fine. But in rough conditions, you still need to be able to maneuver your kayak very swiftly to your swimmer or your casualty. And then the last thing on the training day, which we have to ask permission for, we let people try out flares. So normally it's forbidden to use rocket-propelled flares or any other emergency thing. So we asked for permission with the Coast Guard and also the police force here. And every year we let people actually pull the plug on a flare. And then you see that we're actually not that trained as we sometimes think we are, because every flare from every different brand works in another way. You have to take safety precautions. You have to tell the people, okay, if you're pulling a flare, don't do it right above your kayak, hold your hand to the side, and all those things, which is really fun. Now, we did the training day concept for 5 years, so it's still going on, but for 5 years. And after 5 years, we got, and now comes the funny part, we got an email from Boris and Ivka. It's a couple, the same age as Sylvia and I, and they are from Croatia. And they sent it as an email and said, okay, we're going to start a company, and we're rather not aiming at the lost tourists, but we want to aim to rent kayaks to people who are used to paddle already a bit. So not to beginners, but maybe to a bit more experienced paddlers. And they said, okay, can we attend to one of your training days? And I still remember, normally I answer my emails after one day very quickly. And I said to Sylvia, oh, this is spam. This isn't right. Why should they ask us to it? So I waited for 1 week and I didn't answer. And they sent me a second email. Oh, did you not receive our first one? Can you give us some answer on that? And I said, oh, okay, they are actually serious. So I answered them. I said, okay, if you want to make the trip from whole Croatia up to Belgium for only 1 day, that's fine by me. And after sending a few emails back and forth, they said, okay, we have a little kid, a few years old. It's maybe difficult. It's more realistic, as you say, for 1 day. You know what? Do you want to organize a camp over here? And then I say for a second time, oh no, they must be joking. And I also waited a few days. I talked to Sylvia, I said, something isn't right. Something isn't right. We're not that good that people and from another country are asking actually to us to come lead a sea kayak training camp. And after a few days, I said, okay, let's try it. And they were very enthusiastic. We also, and that's where the start from the new concept, the sea kayak training camp, actually started. We went there the first year. They give us a, you call it here, we call it carte blanche. It's French. It means you can do whatever you want. Are you familiar with the expression? Yeah, they say you can do whatever you want. You have 5 days. It's all up to you. So for a guy like me, who was already training for everything during the past 10 years, I said, okay, this is heaven. This cannot get any better. There's no one that's gonna tell me what to do. I can choose everything myself. And we started with the concept 5 days in a row. Every morning, a theoretical session for the people where we explained everything upon to the smallest detail, which saves us a lot of work in the afternoon where we go on the water then. The days are divided. We start with, for example, the first day we start with assisted rescues to build up confidence, which is great, because the second day we're gonna move on to the self-rescues. And then the people already know, okay, if I'm not successful in a self-rescue, then we already know how to rescue each other, which is not necessary because we explain everything to the smallest detail and everybody always is successful in their self-rescue. Then the third day, we do the, I heard Jonathan saying he already looked up the advanced maneuvering video on our YouTube channel. Well, the third day, it's all about maneuvering, because there's absolutely no use for you to know a rescue technique if you cannot reach your victim in time. So it's very important to be able to maneuver your kayak, not only for safety, but also to have fun, to explore coastlines or whatever. Then the fourth day, and actually every group is very good. So mostly we start already on the third day with that. But on the fourth day, it's scenarios. So it's not just a single exercise. It's not, okay, capsize and now perform a self-rescue. Then it's, okay, no, we're going to paddle in a group. Not in a group, we're going to paddle in a team. That's one of the first things I say at the beginning of the sea kayak training camp. I have a group now on the first day. And by the end of the week, I want to see a team. And every year I see a team, a very good team, actually. And then the scenarios, that's the most fun part of the whole week. Everybody is really looking forward to that. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I have Boris, who is helping me out. That's the guy from Spirit of Corkira, the company who provides the kayaks and all, and the equipment. And for example, we're planning a tour, and then it's every team member. So we allow 10 participants, not more, because we want to offer quality. From the 10 people, it's taking turns to be the team leader, because you can only be a good team member if you know if you know what the team leader actually is thinking. Yeah, and we see if we let everybody, if we give everybody, even the person with the smallest amount of experience, if you say, okay, you're the team leader now, it gives a way better insight when you work as a team later on, even if in the role of a team member. So for the scenarios, suddenly there are a lot of islands over there. Suddenly I give instructions to somebody, whispering so nobody else hears it. Okay, watch your time. Within 5 minutes, I want you to capsize, panic, push your kayak away, and throw your paddle away in the other direction. And in the meantime, I paddle to somebody else in the group. I say, okay, come over here. Also whispering, nobody sees it and hears it. I say, okay, while they're looking at my panicked victim, you're gonna wander off and hide yourself behind the island, because I want to see if they keep a 360-degree view, and if they have learned everything good from the previous days, they actually do well. And I must say, it's always a pleasure to work with such a team. The last big exercise we did, now you must know that maybe also important, the conditions over there are mostly calm. So the techniques we are learning are both basic and advanced, but the environment is mostly basic. And the last thing to close up, the last example I'm going to give you is we did an exercise with the whole crew, so with the whole team, 10 persons. We let somebody paddle into a cliff. Nobody sees it. It's only one person. He have to capsize, leave his kayak in the middle of the gap, swim into a small cave, and then be unconscious. So if somebody yells at him, he's not able to answer. And then I paddle back out, go to the team, and I say, okay, this is the scenario. Yeah, you're just busy with rock hopping, and suddenly you notice that one of your team isn't there anymore. Fix it, and it's fantastic to see all the people work. Everybody in the team has a specific task. You have the team leader who is giving jobs to everybody. For example, okay, you're gonna tow out the empty kayak so we can actually work and see what's happening in the gap and in the cave at the end of the gap. You're gonna be the swimmer. You're gonna start using the personal locator beacon. We have a dummy one, so it's very, very realistic. The last year we had somebody who's actually a doctor. Okay, you're gonna do the medical part of the scenario. So it's really great. Everybody goes home with a fantastic feeling. It's fun, and you have learned something. And that's about the thing. There are two main things we put our attention to. It must be safe and it must be fun. And if you can push people and make sure that people really enjoying being their time in the water, then you're already have gone a long way. I sometimes see clubs or people who say, no, I don't like going in the water. If you have such a reaction, then there must be something wrong with training or with your equipment, or with both of them. So we make sure that everybody is well dressed and that it's fun. So nobody hesitates. If we say, okay, we're going to do a scenario or an exercise, and I say, okay, capsize now, nobody hesitates. It's becoming second nature in only 5 days, and that allows us to become more safer paddlers.
Thank you for that presentation. Let's go another 5 minutes of questions if there are any, and then we'll call it a night. Jan.
Thanks, Dimitri, for talking about that. I noticed this glow in your eyes when you talked about the safety training and people falling out of their boats and stuff like that. It reminds me very much of the Basque Skills Clinic, where we do something similar, except it's distributed over 7 weekends total, with the whole club volunteering on that. And that's actually what I want to ask. When I first saw your videos, I was under the impression you're a professional kayak instructor who runs like a kayak school, rental place or something like that. Do you have a day job, or is this your hobby or your profession?
Well, I'm going to give you a very honest answer, but normally I'm not telling anybody what I do for a living, because reactions can go out 2 ways. I'm actually the officer on duty for the police force on the Belgian West Coast. So it's 20 years now that I'm with the police force. I was a patrolman for 15 years, and now it's 5 years that I'm the officer on duty. With that also comes the fact that I'm almost 10 years a shooting range officer, so an instructor for firearms. That brings that I'm used to speak to people, that I also had take classes on how to educate people. So not on sea kayaking level, obviously, but it really helps me. Also for the scenarios, it's something we train on with the police force. So people, our colleagues, go to the shooting range. Okay, it's shooting on something that doesn't move. It's not that difficult if you're a bit trained, but it becomes difficult when you say to people, okay, we're gonna use like a paintball gun. It's a fixed munition, it's called, and we're gonna do a complete scenario, and then it becomes difficult. And I get a lot of my inspiration from my job, but instead of firearms, I transfer it to sea kayaks, and yeah, it gives a lot of insight. But that's my day job. You're not the first to ask. We had one sea kayak training camp that wasn't in Croatia, but it was in Poland on special request. We do give sea kayak training camps in other countries as well, but on special request. And by the end of the week, It was in Poland, and it was with a translator because I don't speak Polish and not everybody in Poland speaks English. So it went well, even with the translator. We thought, oh no, this is not going to work, but it worked perfectly. A very nice guy, the translator. And they were blabbering in Polish, and Sylvia and I were standing by at the very last day before saying our goodbyes, before we went back home. And they say, okay, the translator said, okay, the guys over here, not the guy who was organizing it, because he knew what I did for a living. But a lot of the participants were asking the same question as you did. And then I said, okay, no, I'm not a professional sea kayak coach, not at all. And they started blabbering in Polish again, which we didn't understand. And then the translator said, okay, they don't believe you. I say, okay, but I'm not lying here. Why should I? It's not my day job. I said, okay, what do you do for a living? And I gave them the same explanation as I did to you now.
Yeah.
They started blabbering in Polish again. They said, really? Which was for us, it's something that I always will remember. For us, it was a really, really, really nice compliment. If somebody thinks you're a professional sea kayak coach while you're actually not, then I consider it a compliment. And we're gonna continue the way we are working now.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I have 15 follow-up questions, but I'll yield for other questions that are out there. Thank you.
I still have time. Time is not an issue for me, as it is early in the morning. My kids are still asleep, so you can ask as many questions as you want.
That's your time zone, but not ours.
Beth, I see you're got a question.
Hi, Dimitri. You know, I just wanted to say, I just realized in like the last 3 minutes who you are. And I just wanted to tell you, I'm a pretty new kayaker in the last year and a half. And I love your advanced maneuvers video and sent that to so many people, and like sent it all around to my new kayaking friends and said, oh my God, this is what I want to be when I grow up. So I just wanted to say your video is really, really inspiring. It's just so elegant. So thank you. Come visit us.
Yeah, I got a request from the United States, but I didn't heard back from that person again to organize a sea kayak training camp. Don't know why. She wasn't obliged. It was a lady from, I'm not sure. I have to look at Sylvia. She don't. It's some time ago. But thank you for the nice compliment. It's always nice for us to see, and I really mean that, that there are actually people looking at our videos and doing or trying to do the stuff that we do. We put a lot of effort in it, and not a lot of people are understanding that. For each video we make, from the simplest video to the more advanced video, for a simple video, it takes us 8 hours just to edit everything, because Sylvie, you probably noticed that it's mostly Sylvie who does the filming and the recording, and she comes back with hours of raw footage, which I have to look in and then put some music on it and edit it so that everybody, even non-sea kayakers, would love to see. On the advanced maneuvers video, I'm looking at Sylvie 2-3 days, I'm not sure, to make sure that it's nice and flowing and that you see it from different angles. It's also a video that we show on our sea kayak training camps, but then we give some explanation with it. So now you have only the video and you see only the things that I do with my upper body and my arms, if you have a good look, but you cannot see what I'm doing with my feet, with my knees, with my buttocks. And that's something during the training days or the sea kayak training camp that we actually gonna explain in detail to the people.
More hands up? I don't see any more hands up. Wait, Jan is another question.
Well, if nobody else wants to ask any questions, I'd like to extend an invitation, in essence. If you ever come to the Bay Area, let us know. We will definitely organize a boat, gear, whatever you need to paddle with us. Paddle in what I believe is one of the best playgrounds ever. And a lot of what you do in your kayak training camps coincides and overlaps with what we do over here. And we have a lot of emphasis on volunteer training people, making new paddlers a team, as you say, exactly that, a team, somebody I want to have on my paddle, somebody who's an asset on a paddle. And yeah, we'd love to, well, have you here for a little while. We probably can't like organize a training camp over here, but definitely if you happen to come to the area, let us know. We will have gear and everything for you and Sylvie, obviously.
That's a big thank you from both Sylvie, because she's also listening next to me, and myself. So thank you for the invitation. I want to give the compliment back also to you, Jan, because I didn't say earlier during the meeting. Also, thank you for your videos. You're also making very good videos, and I see that you also managed to get a lot of people with you on the water, and not just on flat water, but also on moving water and between gaps and rocks and all. Which we really enjoy. So it's a good thing to finally have a chat now face to face. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, thanks a lot.
On that nice and warm sentiment, let's call it a night. Dimitri has his videos, which you should all check it out.